Well, moving right along on the list of recently made horror movies, now I move to one that was from France called Infested. And, well, that pretty much says it all. Yes, a certain apartment building gets infested with some exotic spiders. So it opens up with looks to be some Arabic nation out in the desert. Some guys are searching for something. Oh, they're searching for exotic creatures to sell, more than likely illegally, on exotic creature markets. And in this particular case, they are looking for a rare species of spider. I'm not familiar with this species of spider, and depending on, and as it turns out in the movie, this is a species that I'm pretty sure does not exist. Not that a certain thing like this couldn't occur, as far as a venomous spider that can rapidly reproduce, and oh boy, are you going to have problems in your cramped apartment building. So it immediately demonstrates the lethality of this particular creature, as the guys are able to capture one of them, or a few of them. And next thing you know, well, we move to France, where this guy is snooping around this dude's shop, and he's got all kinds of exotic creatures and whatnot. And the spider catches his eye. It's in a little plastic box, and he's just got to have it. So he's dealing in certain items and goods. In this case, a pair of shoes. Obviously not on the up and up, but well, that's his lot in life. And there's a guy within his building who's been waiting on those shoes, and he manages to secure this for him. But in the meantime, he spends a little extra, quite a bit of extra, on the spider, because he has this obsession himself with exotic creatures. In his own room, there's quite a few, quite the weird menagerie in his room. And then there's this backstory that he and a friend of his, when they were kids, dreamed of the idea that they would have their own exotic zoo or some such. So that lends to the credibility of this guy's obsession with collecting these critters. Well, of course, it's not going to go well. He's very irresponsible in bringing that spider into the house, or the building, rather. And you get a lay of the land. They're all crammed in there, different ethnicities. They don't like each other. There's one guy who's particularly irritated of them all. I guess he's supposed to be the main bigot of the building. And right off the bat, I was like, oh, are they thinking there's some sort of social message here? And of course they are, but it's whenever they do something like this, I mean, as the backdrop of a certain community or what have you, and then that's the nature of it, and these kind of conflicts happen within it and all that, that's all fine, because it's believable and whatnot. But made the mistake of reading what the director's thoughts on it all. He saw that this was the real story in their conflict with the spiders. And the spiders are these murderous monsters, so you end up insulting humanity in that aspect of it. Unless it's just on the characteristic of bigotry, I suppose. But that the spiders aren't bigoted. They don't care. You know, they want to eat and reproduce, and they do. So, yeah, it's always stupid. But as a monster movie, in and of that, it more or less fine. It's just, it gets more and more ridiculous as towards the end you have a dog-sized spider in there. I don't know if you could argue that it was manipulated or it's the conditions within which that it's able to grow to that size. There really isn't much there for that explanation. I think just the idea of how fast they were could have gone a long way. But then, I mean, eventually you've got entire human beings being cocooned in spider webs and stuff, and I'm like, yeah, I don't think so. But the idea of exotic creatures, when you remove them from their natural habitat and introduce them into one that they don't belong, either it's bad news for them or it's bad news for everybody else within that ecosystem. And this happens all the time. Most notoriously was in the Florida Everglades, where people wanted exotic pets in the form of pythons, when the dominant predator was the alligator out there in Florida. But people, they got these pythons, and then they grew up, and they're getting to be a problem, and so they just, spooled them up into the back of a pickup, drove out in the middle of nowhere, and dumped them. So they were fruitful and multiplied, and now they had a problem with all these pythons, and they had outright war with the alligator population, and the gators were losing. As ferocious and monstrous as a gator can be, a lot of the pythons, once they got the drop on them, just wrapped themselves around the gator and squeezed them until they died. But there was even a dead gator got his revenge from beyond the grave, because you could see the dead python where the gator had burst out of the python's guts. He bit off more than he could chew. But that's the thing of what the danger is of bringing in essentially an alien species into this ecosystem, and what could happen. So there's a certain nod to that. It's just a bit over the top. If there was some explanation within the narrative that I don't know, these spiders were mutated and whatnot, but that quickly, no, it would not happen. Unless I'm completely in the dark here and there are spiders that achieve the size of dogs. And I'm talking like maybe like a black lab or something like that. I'm not talking Chihuahua, but even Chihuahua. I mean, they got tarantulas and stuff, but I mean, even get that, because at the point, at the crux of it, they got to escape the building. Now, okay, let me back up. They get trapped in the building, and this kind of reminded me of the movie. It was a found footage movie, REC, like Record. And that one was a Spanish movie, I believe, and there was an American version of it, redone. And which the sequel to the Spanish one is much better than the sequel they did to the American version. But basically, you got a bunch of people, this woman covering the fire department. She's a news reporter, and she's just going to be with the fire department for her story. And then suddenly they get this emergency call and said, oh, good, we'll cover that. And they go to it, and it's an apartment building, and they get locked in it because there's some sort of weird outbreak. Well, it's a zombie plague type thing situation, but they're trapped inside the building. Well, here they're trapped within the building because of the spiders. However, it appears like the police believe there's some sort of fever has broken out because of the reactions to the venom seems to indicate it. So they're like, oh crap, we don't know what this is. So they lock it down. But the problem is it's these spiders. Of course, even if it was the fever, you got people who probably weren't infected, but they soon will be. But they're like, we don't want it getting out of here, So they close it off, and so a lot of people can't get out from the spiders, and so it starts killing. So ultimately, there's a big fight with the police. And I suppose the idea is that the police are really bad and that sort of thing. But within the context of the story, they didn't know what they were dealing with. So, and the main character, if you're supposed to have any kind of sympathies for him, I really don't. This is almost entirely his fault. He was irresponsible and bringing that in there. And he gets all of his friends, well, maybe not all of them, there's a couple other survivors, but and his neighbors killed by these monsters. And just because one guy was a complete a-hole, that doesn't justify what you did. And so it's really bad overall, and I don't really have any sympathies for this guy, in that regard. So really no heroes here in this story. It's an interesting concept that I think could have worked. I think it goes a little too far and a bit silly in some areas, but the rest of it, the creepiness of the spiders everywhere, and then you could, it look like you want to itch all the time. You got creepy crawlies all over you and that kind of thing. But that's about it. So I can't completely recommend it because of some of the stupidity of it. But on the other hand, for the most part, it's not too bad in a lot of ways, especially with the perfect horror elements of the darkened halls and everything within the rundown apartment building and whatnot. So. But oh yeah, back to what I was trying to say. At the end with the dog-sized spider. At the end, they're trying to get out. They use a car to get out. They gotta go through, but the main gate is shut, so they gotta open it. But there's a big dog-sized spider in the way. But if you blast them with light, they're kind of blinded and don't know what to do. And then if you're really careful, you can just walk over to the door switch, which they do, and they get out. So that that's how that works. But that's the big scene of a giant spider. And so, plus they after the police finally are securing the place and dealing with it, they still decide to escape, and they get a lot of police officers killed. So again, I understand what they've been through, and they're not maybe chalking up to not thinking straight, but these are not heroic characters. They do terrible things. Even in the end, they're getting a lot of these people killed, and they really have no argument for justifying it. But anyway, as for just a monster movie, there's some positive elements here in how they handle it. But overall, there's the stupid. In some cases, as long as you don't think about it, it's fine. But if you think about it, it tends to outweigh the good in the presentation of Infested.